the Humiliation Bowl, presented to you by Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt. That's what this game was. And maybe humiliation is taking it too far, but basically Nebraska once again tripped over their double left foot, and Ohio State still tried to help them along the way and help. Ohio State tried to lose, and Nebraska said, "Hold my beer. No, I want to lose more than you." That's what this game was. And yes, Nebraska is a tough team. They are better than their record. And Ohio State is actually the team that has the largest margin of victory over Nebraska all season long. So for you Buckeye fans who are mad about this loss, or others who are making fun of Ohio State just is, by the scoreboard, and by the way how, unlike Oklahoma and some of these other teams, Ohio State traveled to Lincoln. And Ohio State has the largest margin of victory over Nebraska. And Ohio State, I think, is definitely better than Oklahoma, and definitely better than any other team Nebraska has played. Yesterday, even with Ohio State, trying to play in Nebraska's hands, Ohio State is the best team Nebraska's faced all year. And I think this game proves that. So while I am critiquing Ohio State in a certain sense, I'm also saying, hey, you didn't cover the spread, but the spread in a certain sense, and I think I said this in my preview, for how desperate Nebraska's going to be and for how they play their games, this is too high. Like, I thought Ohio State would win by double digits, but I thought that 15 points, it's like that's an awkward score, and it's more likely that Nebraska keeps it close, and at most maybe Ohio State wins by 2 touchdowns, which is 14 points. So I said, I think Nebraska will maybe cover. I'm not a betting expert in any way, but I thought that Ohio State would win by like 10 to 14 points, somewhere in there. It was actually less than that. And entering the fourth quarter, there was that drive where Nebraska was pushing, and I thought they're going to score and take the lead. And Ohio State social media is going to explode into panic, like what Michigan did. Because let me tell you something, and we're going to get to my takeaways in a few seconds. That second pick by Stroud was like, oh my goodness, you just handed, and I think there was a late hit after that as well. That plus the late hit handed all the momentum in the world, and to me also proved that, like, that late hit, I was like, oh boy, even the players don't like it. Ohio State players do not like it when another team who by record should not be challenging them is challenging them. And maybe I'm overlooking this, but look, it looks like Ohio State, Garrett Wilson being out didn't help. Others being out did not help one bit. The O-line looked a little young still, like they did against the Penn State game. In the end, Ohio State got a victory. And if I'm a Buckeye fan, I would not be complaining at all, and I'd actually be holding over my head. We went into Lincoln and beat them by more than Oklahoma did at Oklahoma. And I would use this to support the argument that we're winning the Big Ten. That's what I would do if I'm an Ohio State fan, is, hey, we made all these mistakes, and these mistakes will cost us in the playoff. But to the Michigan fan and Michigan State fan, and I'm sadly a Michigan fan saying this, hey, we're Ohio State. And if I'm an Ohio State fan, I would say we're still winning the Big Ten. Even with all of our mistakes, all of our youth, we could afford to make mistakes and win the Big Ten. Ohio State can do that. And in the back of my mind and everything, I want to believe Michigan has a chance even after this game, and they do. But I don't think with Jim Harbaugh we will ever execute that chance. So moving on to the takeaways. The positives for this game is the defense and special teams bulldozed Ohio State to victory. The offense, like Stroud throwing those 2 picks, the first one was a great play by, I believe it was Doman, It was great play. The second one, you underthrew your wide receiver by what in football would be the equivalent of a mile. You threw it right. That was a John O'Corn type throw. And he's great, and he makes mistakes. But the defense and special teams won you this game. You know, unlike Nebraska, Ohio State has Noah Ruggles, who can actually kick field goals reliably. Noah Ruggles helped you and pushed you to victory. Your special teams, you know, having powerful punts, returning punts to put your offense in those positions even after your offense made mistakes. Your defense and special teams are so much improved compared to the previous part of the season. Compared to the pre-college football rankings section of the season, Ohio State's defense is miles better than it was. Making the switch to Matt Barnes and allowing others input is ingenious. And it's going wonderfully. I mean, you should be happy with this defense and special teams. You know, yes, they allowed some big plays. Yes, they allowed Adrian Martinez to torch you in some spots. They allowed Adrian Martinez to make a few runs. But hey, Adrian Martinez, whether you like it or not, makes explosive plays. He has no O-line and has made explosive plays basically against every team he's faced. And Ohio State is known for ages, like this whole season, that their secondary would have problems, especially after the Minnesota and Oregon games, and especially after their own coaching staff and football team basically said, this is going to be an issue that will take all season to solve. Your defense is that much better. Be happy. And the second positive is Ohio State's backup wide receivers are better than your starters. Facts. Absolute facts. Jackson Smith-Njigba, 240 receiving yards, a long of 75, where he finessed himself out of every Nebraska player's hands. Touchdown. Chris Olave literally outread and outdid Nebraska's defense. Marvin Harrison Jr. got some receptions. Julian Fleming did. They don't even need Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave out there to wreak havoc upon you. And I understand that Smith-Njigba is not necessarily a backup, but he is definitely viewed as, maybe until this game, secondary to Olave and Wilson. Marvin Harrison Jr. made some plays. Fleming, there was a controversial out of bounds. There was a catch where he was ruled out of bounds, and the foot was very close. I still can't tell. Originally, I thought that his toe was touching the white line, but I don't know anymore. That was a good play attempt. Fleming is talented. Harrison Jr. is talented. Ohio State's just wide receiver core, and you can thank Brian Hartline for this, it's legendary stuff. It's the best wide receiver core in the nation. Actually. And Jeremy Ruckert, too. He's a tight end, not a wide receiver, and he only had 13 receiving yards, but he made some key blocks that allowed key third down conversions. So the whole receiving core is filled to the brink, overflowing with playmakers. Absolutely. And another good thing is, despite, the youthfulness of this team, which is listed as a concern, and I'll get to why, you bounced back from adversity, and Nebraska was playing for their coach's job. Absolutely. And you bounced back from adversity. There was a point where after that pick, there was a point where, and I know ESPN's FPI is stupid, but I want to give you an example. You went from, in a few minutes, a 93% chance to win to literally the computers thinking that Ohio State is going to let this game get out of control. That didn't happen. And a team that proves the simulations wrong, which Michigan rarely does. I mean, Michigan if the computers say you're slipping away, Michigan will normally find a way to slip away. Ohio State just bounced right back, held Nebraska, let Nebraska messed up, and said no. And again, Stroud, even with some of his struggles, passing for 400 yards, Smith and Jigba having a breakout game, just all of those are positives. Now for the concerns. Ryan Day, what are you doing? What are you doing? Didn't he run Trevion Henderson 3 times in a row after running an air raid for a great portion of the game? I remember that. Like, Ohio State just kept passing. It didn't always work. And then I see run. And Nebraska stops it and the whole crowd goes crazy. And I'm thinking, what are you doing? Nebraska's trying to get as much pressure as they possibly can because of how good Ohio State's O-line is. Like, they're piling guys forward, just trying to force Stroud to make a mistake. That's what happened actually on the second pick. Eric Chenander just sent, basically, well, an over-exaggeration. He sent everyone forward, and Stroud just panicked and tried to get a deep ball, tried to respond to the pressure with a big play, and it turned out to be a big play, but for the Cornhuskers. But some of Ryan Day's play calling, it was stiff. It was, I want to bully you. It was like a non-adaptive tone. It's what I see every day with my Michigan Wolverines. That's what I saw Ohio State do, was have a similar stubbornness that my own team does with play calling. I'm sitting there, I'm like, are you sure you didn't allow Jim Harbaugh on a Zoom call with Ryan Day and Jim Harbaugh just walked him through how to not adapt when you need to? And in the end, Ohio State won. And it was rough. It's not all on Day. There were some penalties, the late hit being one of them, where it's like, again, what are you doing? But the play calling was somewhat suspect. Similar to the Oregon game, Ohio State threw for 54 times. And if you take out Stroud, being pressured or tackled for loss, I'm just going to take out him running because he really doesn't run well. He's just kind of evolved as a really good pro-style quarterback. If you take out the team runs, Ohio State, Williams, Teague, and Henderson ran for a grand total of 24 times. More than close to 70% of the time, Ohio State said, we're going to pass the ball. And listen, you have a great wide receiver core, your quarterback's great, and yeah, the few times you did run it, Henderson averaged 4.4 yards a carry. But in the grand scheme of things, that play calling allowed Nebraska to stop you when they needed, when it came down to the third down conversion to prevent Ohio State from taking the lead to double digits, when it came down to Nebraska just somehow finding a way to stay in the game. The play calling helped enable Nebraska to do that. It really helped. It played right into what Nebraska wanted, and that's why Nebraska's defense held you to, I think, was a season low in points scored. You scored 28 against Oregon, only 26 against the Cornhuskers, who did not put up the same amount of yards or anything on your defense that Oregon did. So the play calling was a weakness. And I'm not saying Ryan Day's Jim Harbaugh, or I'm not saying he's a bust of a head coach. It's one game. The guy's young, too. And it's a first-time head coach. He'll likely learn from this experience. It was just something that happened, and I have to mention it, because I mention criticisms about my team and other teams while also praising the things that they did well. I try to give credit where it's due. I try not to be biased, and if you've been subscribed to me for a while, you will understand that. Another concern is Ohio State, while ultra-talented, is youthful. Absolutely youthful. Let me give you an example. 8 penalties for 65 yards. The false starts, and I think maybe a delay of game that occurred over and over again, just feeding Nebraska's crowd, who honestly probably wants to leave if they didn't feel bad for their football team. Because going back to Nebraska, their football team just doesn't give up. And if you're a Cornhusker listening to this, I'm mainly talking about Ohio State here. But I'm interested enough in seeing how Nebraska performs. I think I'm going to discuss some Nebraska later on this week. So stay posted for that. But Nebraska just doesn't give up. And there were moments, the late hit being one of them, where it's like Ohio State was angry that Nebraska just wouldn't lay down and accept that Ohio State's a top 5 team. So they just took out their frustration and it turned into mistakes. Another example is Ohio State only having 90 rushing yards and only 3 yards per rush. And again, I didn't count all those 30 rushing attempts because, Stroud's not the best runner or anything. But some of Stroud's decision making, some of the O-line not being able to run block as well as Michigan could against Nebraska, because Michigan ran for like 5.4 yards per average carry against the Huskers. That points to youthfulness, because I know the talent's there. I know Ohio State has 5 stars basically at every position, whether it's O-line, QB, running back, wide receiver. Probably not tight end, because there's very few 5-star tight ends out there. I don't know if there are any in any classes surrounding the 2022 recruiting class. They have them at the defensive line position, the linebacker position, cornerback, free safety, strong safety, whatever. Have them everywhere. So I know it's not talent. It's just youthfulness. This team returned very few defensive starters, and they did not return many offensive starters. I think they were one of the teams who returned the least amount of production from last year. Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and Jeremy Ruckert were the main headline returning people, along with sections of the offensive line. And maybe Master Teague, if you convinced yourself that he was going to be the main starter and somehow drastically improve. So the youthfulness and the play calling really helped Nebraska out. There were moments where I think it was when the game was 17-3, I thought, yup, this is about to be over. And then Nebraska got that touchdown, stopped Ohio State, and they went into halftime with all the momentum at their back. That 72-yard touchdown pass, I'm like, whoa, that came out of nowhere. And then in the third quarter, again, Ohio State, 2 field goals. Nebraska's like, nope, 5 plays, 75 yards, 1 minute 43 seconds. We're going to make it a 6-point game and the closest we've been to you all game. And then I think maybe from there, after that early fourth quarter, I believe Stroud did indeed, he got picked off then. So this was a fun game to follow. And despite, Nebraska going 3-7 and Ohio State winning, I've already accepted that we're probably not going to beat the Buckeyes, so I found myself as a Michigan fan kind of cheering for the other team. This was a fun game to watch. Ohio State here was tested. They looked vulnerable, and Nebraska obviously made plenty of their own mistakes too. You can't miss 2 field goals, and you can't have an 8-yard punt and expect to beat Ohio State. And yet, despite all these things, you've probably pulled closer to beating them than Michigan State will, than Michigan will. Didn't Ohio State just beat Penn State by 9 points? And Penn State is a 6-3 football team, while Nebraska's 3-7. Nebraska is just so close. In this game, once again, if you didn't watch Nebraska football at the beginning of that fourth quarter when they had the momentum, if you watched this game, you would have thought, oh no, Ohio State actually has a test on its hands and they better be ready to respond. Nope. Nebraska tripped over their own foot, missed a field goal, all the momentum was washed away. Like bleach on color. Just took all the color out of the t-shirt. And that's really all I have to say. Look, Ohio State, as I mentioned in my previous, I think, review video, the way to the Big Ten is, somewhat paved for you. And looking ahead, you have Purdue, Michigan State, and Michigan. And that is a tough stretch, but you have reason to believe that you will win all three of those games despite what happened here. And for Nebraska, I'm interested. I want to do some research, read some articles, try to get in-depth and knowledgeable about Scott Frost and that whole situation, because your team with an O-line or a kicker or a punter could be ranked right now. So stay tuned for that. Thank you all for watching. If you liked this video, like this channel, give this video a like and give me a subscription. Comment all of your thoughts down below. What did you think of this game? Do you think this shows that Ohio State is going to be like their 2016 team and find a way to get blown out in the playoffs while still winning the Big Ten? Do you think that maybe Michigan or Michigan State will take the Big Ten away? Or maybe even Wisconsin? What do you think about this Ohio State team? And what do you think about Scott Frost in Nebraska? Do you think it's time to move on? Or do you think Scott Frost is building something, but it's a very frustrating process? Tell me down below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you around.